Good evening, Australia. It's Karen Brewer here from the Bush Telegraph. This is the live chat if anyone would like to join me. I'll just open it up so that if anyone's around and want to pop in, they can if they wish. Sorry, I just need my glasses for that. Australia, I am endeavouring to teach every Australian across the country about this Freemason demoralising network of filth. My journey began with Scott Morrison's sorry speech. I watched that speech and found it to be the most appalling, offensive speech I'd ever seen. I was born in 1968. In my 20s, there was a thing called the Wood Royal Commission into the police corruption. What a joke that was. Growing up in that era, you couldn't really live in New South Wales and not know about it. You know. And of course, then we had suppression orders put on it. And of course, over the years ensuing from that point, there was the Mulligan Report in South Australia. We had a myriad of investigations across the country that were just shut down on orders from above. Then we had things like the recent Royal Commission, for argument's sake. Every commissioner planted on that Royal Commission was a spider insider, Freemason demoralising spider insider. What do we know about pedophilia, Australia? Well, we know they're groomed. Children are groomed. Don't we? That's been well documented. How do you think that happens, Australia? How do you think across the country we get 42,041 fellow Australians contacted that recent Royal Commission? 42,041 fellow Australians. Does that not make you question what's going on in our judiciary and bureaucracies? Because it should. It made me question it, Australia. I watched that sorry speech and found it to be offensive on so many levels. And so I turned my television off and I started digging. Pedophilia is a crime against children. So the first thing I needed to know about all of our politicians was, where did they go to school? And so I started researching that. Every politician, past and present, every Governor-General, every governor of every state. And then I started researching the judges across Australia, past and present. And a pattern soon emerges. Every person, past and present in Australia, that has held any sort of form of authority. Police commissioners, for example. Let's go back to the very beginning in New South Wales. The very first version of a police commissioner we had was a grub by the name of Darcy Wentworth, who was in fact the brother of William Wentworth. And William Wentworth was a dirty Freemason. That was the beginning of the corruption in our police services. And here we are today with a Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, whose father was John Morrison, Chief Inspector of Divisions 10 and 15 of New South Wales Police. What do we know about the era of John Morrison? The era of John Morrison was the Wood Royal Commission and the cover-up as things bubbled to the surface because Franca Arena was the only politician in New South Wales with a backbone. And where was your outrage? You were all kept so busy at work, you couldn't focus on what was going on right in front of you. And as I started this journey of researching all our politicians and those in the judiciary, you start to realise it's the same cycle, the same schools, over and over again. That's odd. That's really, really odd. And so I started researching those schools, the founders of those schools, all Freemason Pedophiles, all of them. And then you cross-reference with the case studies and the published testimonies on the Royal Abuse Commission's website, on the Royal Commission Sexual Abuse website. You start cross-referencing that with the largest list of Australian Freemasons. You'll find all these links posted on my page. That connection is undeniable, Australia. And the present politicians protect their dirty family secrets because they are in fact all one family. They are the Freemason Pedophiles network of incest and pedophilia, and they are in fact a cult, Australia. I have spent 2 years researching every politician and judge. And it's really easy. You just have to answer 2 questions. Where did they go to school? And who's their daddy? We're going to talk for a moment about Senator Bill Heffernan's speech, where he goes on extensively about the abuses that happen in our family court. He also told you every Attorney General from Philip Ruddock until now has seen these documents. One of those Attorney Generals was Robert McClelland. He now sits in the family court as a judge. Do you really think he should be sitting in the family court, Australia, when he doesn't know right from wrong? He was a 3rd generation politician. His father and grandfather were also politicians. As was Philip Ruddock, his father was a politician. We have a legacy across the country since the very beginning of the abuses towards children in Australia. Starting with 2 ships that were stationed in Sydney Harbour, collectively holding 500 boys. That progressed into being things like the Penang Boys' Home, Parramatta Girls' Home, a myriad of charities that also run institutions that we now know were rampant in pedophilia. It's not a coincidence. That's the network. Secret society within a society. Every governor since the very beginning is a Freemason. And you know that by identifying where they went to school and who's their daddy. Every journalist across the country, past and present, where did they go to school? Who's their daddy? On some level, we all know there's something very wrong with our media. That's what's wrong with them, Australia. They are all Freemason Pedophiles. And I need you guys to start sharing this knowledge with your fellow Australians. Because I'm getting tired of people asking me questions like, oh, what about this politician or what about that politician? Answer those questions yourself. Where did they go to school? Who's their daddy? What party are they representing? Who founded the party? Where did they go to school? Who's their daddy? Over the last few days, I've had a number of people ask me about that Holton woman from New South Wales who represents the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, which I have covered political parties extensively. It only takes a few moments to go through my videos, but again, John Tingle founded the Shooters and Fishers Party, right? He is a Freemason de Morlaix from a Freemason de Morlaix school. And again, we're going to go through this right now, Australia. The closed loop and how it began, and the school system which is used to groom and abuse. So come with me, Australia. This is Senator Bill Heffernan, 20th of October 2015. He is the only politician with a backbone. He is the only politician sitting in the Parliament calling out the network of filth. What does that tell you about every other politician? Their silence convicts them, Australia. I need you guys to hit share on these videos right now. This is the network of filth. Their silence convicts them now. People constantly asking me, what about Pauline? What about Darren? I would really like to say to you all, do you know where they went to school? Do you know who their daddy is? How many times, Australia, does this network of abuse have to continue before you start asking questions? Because surely, in your heart, you know that Bill Heffernan sitting alone says something about every other politician. Doesn't it, Australia? Just take a moment to think about it. You've got to begin to use Google and answer these two questions about every politician, past and present. You have to learn the tools so that you can lead your family, you can lead your neighbours, your family and your friends and your community. I need you to share the knowledge. Bill Heffernan said in that speech, every Attorney General from Philip Ruddock until now has seen these documents and they are very disturbing. A whole lot of prominent people are named in these documents. He goes on to say, I have produced a set of documents under an order to produce, which includes, disturbingly, documents that name in one document 28 people as alleged pedophiles, signed off by Gary Crook QC, counsel assisting the early Royal Commission. That would be the Wood Royal Commission. You notice he says documents, plural. Okay? He goes on. Paddy Bergen. Sorry, I'm on my iPad, so. Paddy Bergen, counsel assisting at the time, said we will rise for morning tea, and they never went back to it. I did ask the Commissioner why, And he said, "We've decided not to revisit that issue. The public would lose confidence in the judiciary." This is Patricia Ann Bergen, Australia. They later appointed her as a judge. So tell me, Australia, how long does this silence have to go on before you all begin to realise you must do the work to know the connection? This little grub here, Alistair Webster, is just one example, Australia. He was the superintendent of Durrock Boys' Home. And then they made him a federal politician. He sat in your parliament for nearly 10 years. They all know, Australia. They all know, and they don't care, because to every politician past and present, incest and pedophilia is their normal. That's how you progress through this network of filth. That is Freemason Pedophiles. Franca Arena told you about this network in the 90s. Senator Bill Heffernan sat in our parliament and gave multiple speeches about this network of filth. 18 years Senator Heffernan was talking about that. He stood alone, but he stood anyway. When the police find it necessary to put a judge under surveillance, I think we have got to a point where we have a problem. And when that surveillance is dropped because of a lack of cooperation between the AFP and the New South Wales Police, we have a problem. These are proven facts and well documented. Politicians and the judiciary fuck with your kids. Give us the strength to change the things we must not accept. This is not acceptable, this culture of silence and protectionism for their dirty, dirty secrets. No more silence. We know the network. You got to call it out, Australia. No more pussyfooting around with things like, oh, why don't they do something? Why don't they? There is no they, okay? There is no they. Just Freemason Pedophiles. That's the connection. I've researched them all, Australia. And now we're going to come over here to the abuses that continue to this day. They lie to you, straight out lie to you, Australia. This little grub here, he is the commissioner of the AEC. His name is Tom Rogers, and he's a liar, Australia. This is the report from the AEC to the government on the informal vote, the intentionally informal vote. You'll find this posted many times on my page. And what it does say on page 10, it does in fact say, represents a decreasing level of trust in the government. And that's what it looks like. The political parties don't want you to know it, but that's how you sack them all and rid yourself of their network of filth. They don't want you to know that, and they're quite confident that they can in fact continue to abuse you. But here's the reality, Australia. Across Australia, there is a combined total of 827 federal and state politicians versus 25.5 million Australians. So those odds, 30,229 Aussies to one politician. And yes, everyone's planted out. All the prime ministers, the bureaucrats, the judges. This is interesting, Australia, because you see, Franca Arena's speech left behind a legacy. If you take the time to read that, you'll find that there was a meeting that happened between James Roland Wood and Bob Carr, as the Royal Commission was about to explore who in the legal fraternity frequented the Costello Boys' brothel in Kellett Street, King's Cross. So in order to hide and conceal the truth, these two had a meeting and they worked out their little plan. And this little grub here at the time was an advisor to Bob Carr. Previously, he'd been an advisor to Gough Whitlam. There's a young Mark Latham. Yes, used to be with the Labor Party, now masquerading as a One Nation candidate. He's a liar, Australia. A dirty, dirty spider insider. And so they worked out the little plan, and Paddy Bergen here, when that topic of the Costello Boys' brothel in Kellett Street, King's Cross, came up, Paddy did say, "We will rise for morning tea," and they never went back to it. Gary Crook QC got a mention in Bill's speeches. Gary Crook QC signed off on the documents. And here we have our Prime Minister of today, Scott Morrison, from Sydney Boys High School, and that's his father. You'll find the links to that article posted many times on my page. And you see this article just under that one about Scott Morrison, claims of sex raffles at Bondi. That's demolay, because they have the children abuse on each other. That's the network. And naturally, the politicians, the political parties, and the bureaucrats do not want you to know how to empower yourselves. Lots of money's at stake here, Australia. These political parties earn millions of dollars deceiving you. Do you ever wonder, Australia, about how our politicians all become so wealthy as they continue to rob you blind? Every charity organisation and every religion, every government institution across the country was involved in these abuses. That's not a coincidence, Australia. That's the Freemason Demolay network family of incest and pedophilia. It's their normal. These are the 46th Parliament of Australia. Every one of them silent. And that silence convicts them now. People like Bendover Benny Morton, out of Wyong High School, in his demolay years, isn't it, Benny? Started a little charity up there at Wyong, supposedly for abuse victims. No, it wasn't. It was a whistleblower gathering facility. And you know who funded bend over Benny Morton's charity? You did, Australia. Another charity funded by government grants. But there'll be no aged pension for you. You need to wake up to the network, Australia, because it's undeniable. And then, after a constant letter-writing campaign to my federal members and senators, I got back 2 pages of bullshit after over a year of needling from our Attorney General, Christian Porter. That said, future correspondence from you may not receive a response. And so Karen dug harder to get to the bottom of this network of filth, which is in fact Freemason Pedophiles. That's the common denominator. And so, Australia, I need you to share the knowledge. I need you to share the knowledge. Our fellow Victorians locked up down there. Okay? The pedophiles walk out of our courts. You want to know why? Look no further than that. Look no further than that. Sir Lawrence Street. Big time judge. That's his supposedly grandson. Robert Emmett. Pedophile maths teacher from Anglican Grammar School in Sydney. No jail time. And Senator Heffernan told you there's a former Prime Minister on this list, and it's a police document. There are a whole lot of prominent people named in these documents. You've got to understand the subtleties in Bill's speech, Australia. So, I hope you all share the knowledge, Australia, because this is the network. That is, in fact, the network. For argument's sake, like I've been discussing with you all, Anne, when she became aware that I'd read her maiden speech, she got hurt feelings. So she ran down to one of her Freemason mates in some imaginary court. Michael Wheelahan is his name, and got all my videos taken down from Facebook because her feelings were hurt. And Wheelahan comes out of St. Kelvin's College in Melbourne. Well-documented school for paedophilia, across decades, by the way. And recently, just a few months ago, that school again was on your idiot box, as those boys on that tram sang the most appalling songs after having been groomed inside the Freemason Pedophiles school. Right in front of you, it's played out every day. Where did they go to school? And who's their daddy? And now here we have Frank asking, what do I think of Pauline Hanson? So Frank, I would say to you, Pauline Hanson has in fact been in and around Parliament since 1996. What do you think all those decades of silence says about Pauline Hanson? The Facebook censors hammer me so much. Tell me why you think the Facebook censors hammer me so much. You know, Pauline Hanson is not controlled opposition. Pauline Hanson is in the know. You've got to accept that. Decades of silence. You know, people still every day ask me about Darren Hinch. He's out of New Plymouth Boys High School in New Zealand. He was sent over in Australia to highlight through the media. He was chosen because he is compromised and can be dealt to, can be controlled. This whole thing is a house of cards. And it's up to you, each and every one of us, to bring it to an end. Yeah. And so I would ask you all, what do you think I'm hammered so much for? Because I'm speaking the truth, Australia. And you know it. You might not be ready to face it yet, but on some level, you do know it. All right, guys, I'm going to leave it there for tonight. The Bush Telegraph. I'll see you all in the morning. I need you to share the knowledge. Where did you go to school? Who's your daddy? Bye, folks.